Sanchez, but I see that she's joined us, and same with Romero Worth. Their cameras just aren't on. There we go. All right. Then
And
let's
you're
go
on.
ahead and we're on YouTube. So let's go ahead and call to order the Finance Committee meeting of October 19th at approximately 5 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
I'll take the roll call. Councillor Renee Villarreal.
Present.
Councillor Ramon Tigarabeta.
Here.
Councillor Signe Lindell.
I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth.
I'm here.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. The next item is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, changes from the committee. Can I have a motion on the agenda? We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Yes,
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Councillor Romana Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that's the agenda. As far as the consent agenda, are there items that we need to take off the consent agenda? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item F as in Frank.
Okay,
G. And I'd like to co-sponsor J, the resolution for authorizing and supporting public works applications for grants. And that's
okay,
it.
so you want to withdraw item F and G, you said?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. Any other items? Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Also, I want to pull J. And I also have a question on F, and I think that was all.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Sorry, I'm having a issue with PrimeGov. Where can somebody help me with the item number for the CYC funds? Sorry, one sec.
I believe that is going to be item D.
Okay, sorry, just got it up. No, it is, I believe maybe it's I.
Oh, yes, okay.
correct.
But that's for prevention and intervention services for youth. Is that the one?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Councilwoman Lindell.
Also quickly, item H. I also had item I to pull, but thank you, Councillor Cassett Sanchez.
Okay, and the items I had questions on have already been pulled. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Move to approve as amended.
Second,
Second,
Okay, and just before we have a roll call, so I have it right, item F, the items that are being pulled for discussion are F, G, H, I, and J. Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes, but just quick point of clarification, was D pulled?
No, I had identified D thinking that was Cassette Sanchez's
Oh,
item.
okay.
That
Okay,
was,
sorry. Sorry, yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
yes,
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
yes.
Councillor Romana Beta.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is approval of minutes, but my agenda doesn't identify which minutes are there. Ms. McCoy, do we have the date for the minute?
Mr. Chair, if Carolyn can answer that question.
Give me a minute, let me pull it up.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
are the minutes on I don't see it on PrimeGov. So should we postpone till the next meeting?
yes. So can I have a motion to postpone the minutes?
Move to postpone the minutes.
Second,
Okay, can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes,
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
yes.
Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that brings us to the items that were withdrawn from the consent calendar. The first is item F, which is a request for approval of budget adjustment resolution in the amount of $398,750.64 to pay back taxes to the IRS for the 2016 and 2017 tax years. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had questions because it was not in our packet, but it was emailed to us. And so I just want to confirm some things. I wasn't able to read it. I read it quickly, but I just want to ask a couple questions about that. So because of the coding, I don't always understand where the funding is coming from to cover this particular expense. Can you all remind us about that?
Mr. Chair, councilors, the funding will be coming from the general fund reserves.
Okay. And then was there a need to have to pay interest because they were late payments?
Mr. Chair, councilor, the IRS is only charging us for the back taxes for calendar year 2016 and calendar year 2017, but no interest or penalties were incurred by the city.
Okay. All right. And then I think you outlined kind of where we're going to be headed in terms of correcting procedurally how we would make sure we don't incorrectly, I don't know if it's the right word, code employees. So we'll have those procedures sent to us probably, what was it, January, I think I saw, 2021? So that we'd have an outline and understanding of what those procedures would be. Is that a resolution or what would you send us? I don't know who wants to answer that.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Villarreal, are you talking about the individuals that were originally considered contractors? Is that the group you're talking about?
Yeah, and I felt like there was two things that we needed to change policy-wise, and maybe you could just summarize that for us.
So I think, HR and finance can work together when we have someone to determine whether they are truly a contractor under IRS regulations or they meet the definition of an employee. So we can work together and develop a business process. But again, we would just be complying with the IRS regulations.
And is there anything that needs to come forth to the council for this?
I don't think that we necessarily need to develop a policy that would mandate that we comply with the IRS regulations. I think it's more of a business process to ensure that we are following the guidelines. So I don't necessarily think we need a policy to comply with that.
Okay, just checking to see what's next for this. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Bern, I'm wondering if you could put together for us some kind of a matrix of whether someone's a temporary, how that works, how many hours, at what point we become responsible for benefits package and all of those kinds of things, so that we really know what we're looking at. I mean, certainly what this council knows is that these aren't, when did these violations originate? What was the origination of these that we're trying to take care of now?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, the original violations were identified by the IRS over a decade ago, back in 2009, when an original audit was conducted by the IRS of the city. The years under review at that time were calendar years 2006 and 2007. So since then, the city did not correct the areas of non-compliance. So since 2006 and 2007, the city has been out of compliance. So when the IRS came in 2 years ago, in 2018, they started to review calendar years 2016 and 2017 for all of the items that were identified in the memo, the worker classification piece, as well as the taxable fringe benefit piece. And so it's been the short answer to your question is that it's been over a decade that the city has not been in compliance.
Thanks for giving that information. I think it's important for people to realize that it isn't something that really and truly anybody in this group has any fingerprints on. We're trying to, I have to tell you that I came on this council in 2014. I've never even heard about this. So I just want to clarify that this isn't something new that happened in the last 18 months, that we're dealing with something that we inherited from a decade ago, which the numbers are certainly far from pleasant. The timing couldn't be worse for us. And I'm sorry that we have to dig ourselves out of this kind of hole. But I do think it's important that we get a matrix burned so that we can do as good a decision making as we possibly can.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Lindell, I can absolutely get that for the group.
Great. Thank you, Chair. That's all I had.
Okay, and Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way in the PrimeGov packet that we received last week, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what happened here. So in 2009, there was an audit of 2006 and 2007. We were at that time told that we weren't doing things correctly and we owed back taxes. And at that time, we paid those back taxes, correct?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then fast forward to 2018, prior to this administration, we were audited again. Or as
Mr. Chair, Councilor, this was one of the first audits that I started back in the fall of 2018 when I first began with the city.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
The IRS came in and notified us that the exam years would be for calendar year 2016 and calendar year 2017. So since then, over the course of the last 2 years, we've had an ongoing audit by the IRS. Essentially what that entails is the IRS, like very similar to our external audit or any internal audits, the IRS auditors requested a series of documents and information and data from the city over the course of the last 2 years, at which point we provided that information and had updates with the IRS auditor about the progress of the review. At one point as well, because of the nature of some of the non-compliance issues, the IRS agent that was assigned to us also met with the union leadership for AFSCME, police, and fire. This was specifically in reference to the issues that were raised with non-compliance for the taxable fringe benefits.
Okay, so what I meant to say is that this audit in 2018 covered years prior to this administration, 2016 and 2017. But the audit was conducted at the beginning of the beginning of 2018. And I would characterize this as part of getting our house in order. Among the many things that we have been doing to put the city on the right course and the right financial footing in terms of how we do business. And so I think that's why we're seeing this come forward as those proactive attempts to audit and figure out what's been done correctly and what's been done incorrectly in the past, and how do we kind of right the ship moving forward.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, that is correct. It is a very long 2-year process, but we are very grateful that we have received this independent review from the IRS to let us know where we need to be in compliance, going back to more than a decade ago.
Right, and so that just gets me back to, so we knew back in 2009, as a result of that audit, that there were things that weren't, that we needed to correct. And then we fast forward to 2018 and nothing's been done to correct it. So what we're being asked to pay today is for the fact that in 2016 and 2017, we hadn't corrected the systems. And so therefore are owing that tax again.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then as I read through the memo and the types of employment that this affects, I mean, it's things like fitness instructors, whether we characterize them as contract workers or employees, and come to find out we should be characterizing them as employees, and we were characterizing them as contractors, correct?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, yes, that is correct.
And then we also saw an example in the courts where we have, I guess, what are called pro tem judges, and it's a funny term, but it means basically what? Professional temporary? Why do we call them pro tem judges?
I can answer that, Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Romero-Worth. I think that's the term that's used in all the court systems for folks that are essentially appointed to take the place of the judge when she's either unavailable or has a conflict.
Okay, and I guess the reason why I was saying they're professional temporary is because they're on contract, right? And they're hired for specific periods of time to fill in for our main judge when she's not available.
Chairman Abeyta, Councilor Romero-Worth, that's correct. And the analysis for those positions was a little bit different than for the other employees. It had more to do with the fact that those employees are public officials, and all public officials fall into this category that needs to have employment taxes paid for. So because they have the same rights and responsibilities as our regular judge when they're serving under our charter, so the charter specifically provides for them, then since they have those official duties and powers, they can't be a contractor.
Okay, so that's interesting, because I guess my overarching question was just to lay some foundation to understand, what impact as we now move forward and correct the past is that going to have on our employment situation at the city. I mean, so there may be some employees, whether they're fitness instructors or pro tem judges, who, maybe they have retirement they're retired, and therefore they can't take on full employment. And so we might not be able to hire them for things that we need at the city anymore. On the flip side, I guess that helps us, it provides employment opportunities at the city, but we lose out on maybe some of that experience level that we might get with people who are retired and willing to work on contracts. So I'm just sort of curious, what kind of an impact does the change in policy have, or is it going to have on our workforce as we move forward, and our ability to hire the workforce that we need? And I don't know who should answer that. Maybe Bern.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Romero Worth, those are some really good points that you raise. What we can do is work a little bit more with the departments who will be impacted by this change, and determine the number of hours that they're needed a week, because all those fine details go into what the policy is for para, hiring a retiree from para, when someone's retirement benefits would kick in after a certain number of hours worked per week, all those details. So really just working with the departments to determine how many hours they're actually working to fulfill those responsibilities, and then determining what that can look like. But certainly we can kind of do a same matrix that Councilor Lindell talked about, so we can identify what those impacts would look like, because there are some exemptions under PERA where we might be able to still employ some of the retirees, but there's a process that you go through, so we just need to understand the details from the department so we can do that work, so we can really understand what the impact will be.
Okay, because I think of course, hiring people means that we have to pay not only salaries, but benefits. So it does have a fiscal impact on the city's budget as we move forward, and as we now have to hire people as employees, which is good opportunities for many people, but it's different budgetarily than the contract workers where we were just paying for their time.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, yes, that is correct. As we are going through the analysis that Director Salazar outlined, we will be also analyzing the fiscal impact to each of the departments, to each of the funds. So we will be able to, if there is going to be a need for another budget adjustment for the operations to be able to come into compliance with this, with the IRS code, we will then bring that to council. At this point, it is undetermined.
Okay, and I think that's an important point, that this is all being driven by IRS compliance with their regulations about how you hire employees and what shape that has to take.
Mr.
Right.
Chair, Councilor, yes, that is correct.
Okay, that's all I had. I just that's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez, did you have anything?
No, I have nothing to add at this time. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion regarding item F?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Now have a roll call, please.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next item is item G, which is a request for approval of a budget adjustment resolution / budget increase to the Public Utilities Utility Billing Division for several line items for a total amount of $454,919. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question for staff about what the expenses will entail. And I appreciate the matrix, how you broke it down with postage and repair and maintenance, et cetera. Can you let me know is this the same software and ITT support that we talked about? I don't know, I guess it's already 6 months ago that we decided that we wanted to not extend it for a year, but try 6 months and see how it's going. And also if we had funding support for that.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal. So this is the portion of the shortage of the budget to get us to the 350,000 for the first 6 months.
Right.
So yeah, so with the cut in the budget, there were, our print company, the Postal Pros company that prints the bills, postage, the ITT software. Those are the items that equal the 454,000 to get us through the fiscal year. We will be bringing forward in the not too, in the future, pretty close, a request for the additional 6 months to the ITT software assistance that we'll need from January through June.
Okay, so that portion's not rolled into this request, is that correct?
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry, Counselor. No, it's not. There will be an additional request for potentially the 350,000 for the next 6 months.
Okay, so that's a separate contract that you'll bring forth to us, and this is just cuts that were made due to the projections of the budget deficit, and so we're rolling these back in now that where's this coming from again?
So it is coming from cash reserves, and we are funded by the 3 utilities: water, wastewater, and environmental services. So it is the additional amount to get us through the fiscal year due to the revenues that we've projected coming in, and each month, of course, billing for all of the services, which is about 65 million of calendar year.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. The other question I had is for the maintenance of the building. You said that, I think I read that it was partially done, but the maintenance wasn't completed because of funding, or what exactly was the situation?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, you are correct. We've had some major HVAC heating and cooling system problems, some burst pipes, some overheated electrical issues. And so this additional 25,000 from me and an additional 25,000 from the water division, hopefully we'll get the HVAC system and the air conditioning system up to speed with new piping, the up to date, I guess you could say, by code. Old pipes, of course, unfortunately burst. So we have had to maintenance and fix that.
Okay, in your matrix though, for that particular portion, it says 25,000 for the repair and maintenance to building and structures, but you said there's an additional 25K for that. Where does that factor in?
Well, the total to fix the HVAC system is 50,000. But since we are half of the building, utility billing is charged 25,000, and water division, who's the upstairs, is charged the additional 25,000. And of course, they had that in their budget.
Okay.
I didn't have it in mind.
Got it. I got it. Okay, so that's already accounted for, and then your portion, the 25K, will cover the rest of it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, got it. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anything, Councilwoman Romero Worth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 quick questions. So in the memo, it says something about the additional phone headsets need to be purchased and replaced as they break, must be provided to continue safe working. I'm curious about why they break. I mean, are they just worn out, or are they not good ones, or it's just a funny phrase there, as they break?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, unfortunately, they're just those little clip-ons that go onto your ear. And unfortunately, they are not the best or sturdiest, I guess you could say. I get about a year to a year and a half out of them. I do have 9 customer service reps that use them, obviously, day to day. So I try and keep 1 or 2 on hand. But unfortunately, if I'm replacing 3 or 4, then I need to potentially replace 3 or 4 every year. So it's a piece of equipment, electronic equipment that is used every day, and unfortunately, they do break. They, I don't want to say get stepped on, but sometimes there's accidents that happen.
Okay, it's just a funny phrase in your memo, and it just leads me to believe, do we have the right ones for the kind of use that they get? And, I leave that to you, but rather than just continuing to buy something that's not worth having, maybe we need to upgrade. But again, I guess that's sort of in your wheelhouse. My last question is the HVAC heating and cooling. So I think we just approved money from CARES Act to help with air filtration as part of our COVID safe practices. Just curious whether this is an opportunity to be thinking about how we provide air filtering for that building besides the heating and cooling, and whether those systems are interconnected or not.
I am not sure, so I will definitely take that under advisement and see if we can pull in some of that money and make sure that, yes, obviously that the air is filtered. It is an older building, so that would definitely help if we can tie into that also.
Well, because I know you also mentioned in your memo that your people in utility billing have not worked from home. They've been present in the office, and seems like we want to make sure as we move forward that we're paying attention to the air quality, as we know that's going to be important now and in the future.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. We definitely will make sure that happens. They do have all of the disinfectant, the masks, the shields, anything like that. But absolutely, if we can get the air quality better with filters or whatever, we will definitely do that.
Okay, just looked like an opportunity. And I'm not an engineer. I don't know how these things work, but they must be interconnected somehow. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, what is the pleasure of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Now have a roll call, please.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes,
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is a request for the approval of contract amendment number 1 to professional service contract, which is a change of scope of work as requested by the contractor, St. Elizabeth Shelter. Councilwoman Lindell.
thank you, Chair. I just would like an explanation on this. I mean, it appears that previously we were offering service to 600 unduplicated adult individuals and/or families at $166.67 per individual or adult family. And now we're offering service to 100 individuals at $1,000 per adult family. I need someone to explain this to me.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Lindell. This is Julie Sanchez, the Division Director for the Youth and Family Services Division. And I will tell you that when St. Elizabeth's entered the first year of this professional contract, they were being very overzealous on the folks that they were looking at serving, and this is pre-COVID. And actually, they were not able to meet their contractual obligation of serving 600 people in that first year. They actually served about 350 in that contract, so they were not able to spend down their funding in that first year of the contract. In the second year of their contract, which began July 1st, Because of COVID, they had to significantly reduce the amount of folks staying in their shelter. And so again, they're probably going to not meet their numbers and not be able to spend down their contract. So in order for them to meet their numbers with the current COVID recommendations from the governor, we negotiated 100 unduplicated adults for their shelter.
Well, I can follow those numbers, but we're paying 600% of what we were paying before. Would it make any sense that we reduce the amount of the contract?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Lindell, if I may, Kira Ochoa, Director of Community Services. These contracts last year were the first year that we structured contracts on a deliverables basis, asking contractors performing safety net services to enter the Connect network. And we knew when we did that contractors couldn't fully predict in their budgets what navigation would really take. And so we knew that we might need to adjust some of these contracts either up or down, depending on how many people they could actually serve. There's no standard dollar amount yet on these contracts in the network for navigation services. These contracts are structured to also support operating expenses at these nonprofits. And so it is not exactly accurate to say that it costs them that dollar amount to serve that number of people. The navigation services that they perform at St. Elizabeth, they prove to be more intensive than simply entering people into a database, which is what they, I think, initially anticipated when they put forward their budget of serving 600 people. They really drilled down and began to, especially with the pandemic, link people to long-term housing and to really do some intensive case management. So we feel that this new formula more accurately represents what it takes for them to serve people with navigation services and offer the safety net services that they do. For context, I'll say that when I launched these types of contracts in the Connect network at the county, every contractor proposed a different dollar amount for the navigation services. But by year 2 of those contracts, we had been able to look at and standardize that per person amount from a per person amount for high intensity navigation of 2,500 a person, and for lower intensity navigation for 1,000 a person. And we do anticipate, after we look at a year and a bit here, maybe 2 years of these kinds of navigation contracts, being able to do that again and standardize a dollar amount that essentially allows the nonprofit to operate and provide those safety net services. At the same time, they are entering people into our Unitas platform and navigating them to meaningful services that'll stabilize them in the long term. I hope that's helpful.
Well, it is. It just, you know, is someone trying to make a decision about these contracts and these monies? It's very hard that, you know, well, we needed, I don't know if they're like, oh, we need to have the same amount of money, 100,000, but we got to have, it just, there's something about it that the formula of it doesn't sit well with me, that we're staying at 100,000. And however we need to get to that number, that's how we're going to get to that number. Now it's 100 at $1,000 per. And previously it was kind of a screwball number of $166 with 600 people. So, you know, it could have been, you know, maybe 200 people at $500 per. It just seems like we're trying to find a way to get to this number of 100,000, and the 100,000 isn't based specifically on what the cost of service is or how many people we're asking them to give services to. So I'm not overly comfortable with this. I'm assuming the term of this is 1 year. Yes, okay. I don't know, maybe someone else has some questions about it. It seems like we're trying to bend our number of people served and the amount that it costs to serve them so that it equals $100,000. And I'm a little uncomfortable with how we've done this. Thank you, Chair.
Anything else from the committee? Ms. Ochoa, when does this go to quality of life, or has it gone there already?
Mr. Chair, it goes to the next quality of life meeting.
Okay, and I would assume, I don't believe quality of life existed last year when we approved something like this, right? So this will
Mr.
be
Chair, that's correct.
Okay, so maybe this is something, Councilwoman Romero Worth, that the Quality of Life Committee can get more clarity on, especially as we move forward. And I have a feeling this is what's going to happen with some of the other items that the Finance Committee that are related to these contracts for service. We'd like the Quality of Life Committee to really vet and, recommend. Any other comments from the committee? Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess with some of my experience in this field, that frequently those dollar amounts really are the cost of service, because the cost of service is your staff. And I definitely understand Councilor Lindell's discomfort with how the equations have moved. But I think why I do feel comfortable is that the importance of the paying for the operations to move in, and the lack of really stability of what those operations are going to be needed. And especially I think during these times of COVID, there's just not going to be as many people going through St. Elizabeth's, as we have made sure that there will not be as many people going through St. Elizabeth's. So just wanted to add that comment in, that I don't find this quite as abnormal, that I've seen this frequently, that really what you're looking at is paying for the general operation. And it's very possible that for the same amount, they will navigate 150 people, that they're not going to stop at 100. And that variation may very well occur. So thank you. That was all I wanted to add. And I agree, we'll definitely talk about this more in quality of life.
Okay, anything else, Councilwoman Lindell?
No.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Now have a roll call, please.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Councillor Roman Abeyta.
Yes. Okay, so that item passes. We are on to item I, which is a request for the approval of multiple service agreements in the total amount of $3,749,652 for prevention and intervention services for the youth of Santa Fe for 3 years. And there are multiple vendors. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think this question slightly is on the same level of looking at these contracts as I forget exactly what Director Ochoa mentioned, but basically deliverables. How many of people are we serving? And I know that these contracts were, these applications came in pre-COVID, the decisions were made pre-COVID. And I'm curious how these organizations are adjusting service levels, if the targets that they had proposed are still reasonable given the current situation, and how we are assessing that.
So, Mr. Chair, Councillor Cassett Sanchez. So it's really interesting that you brought that up, especially given the contract with St. Elizabeth's. Unfortunately, I have a feeling that I will probably have to be back in front of you for some of those contracts, whether it is to reduce the contract amount or to figure out a much more, to figure out a better target for some of these agencies. I know a lot of them, because they are deliverable-based contracts, have gotten really creative with the way that they're doing programming, whereas other contractors have actually seen an increase, have seen some increases in the needs for their services. So it's just going to be kind of playing it by ear with each agency and with each contract to see exactly where they are in the next probably a few months. But I imagine that a lot of the funding will end up being spent down, just given the way that they've had to adjust to COVID now that we've been in it for about 6 months.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So it sounds like stay tuned and we'll get more information about, about how these things develop. The one piece that I just want to be cautious of, I know that these are 3-year contracts. And I know in the grant making world that there is frequently this motivation to spend down your dollars, because there's fear that if you don't spend your dollars, that your funder is going to think that you don't need those dollars. And what I want to make sure that we are communicating with these vendors is that if they are these contracts, if based on the needs and the changes with COVID, if for some reason those dollars are not getting spent down, that we don't penalize them in the future. So there's not this feeling that they need to be spending down dollars, because we know that right now there's a lot of places for money, and these service providers provide great programming, and I am in full support of supporting those programs. However, given the current situation, if any of them are operating in a place where those dollars are not going to need to be utilized, I want to ensure that they don't feel this pressure to spend the money, or that we will be taking it away in future years. So as you're communicating with those vendors, I think that, or the, I don't know why I keep saying vendors, these service providers, I want to make sure that that is communicated. And if there are dollars that can come back, or maybe go to the innovation fund, which I imagine is going to be very interesting at this time, as there are very different needs in our community, or perhaps not different, but more highlighted needs in our community, and different ways to be solving those needs. I want to make sure that these dollars are being spent responsibly, and that people aren't just trying to spend them to make sure they can keep their funding in the future when they can go back to regular programming. So that was all I had for this one. Thank you.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to see, piggybacking off of what Councilwoman Cassett Sanchez was saying, I guess I'm more of the mindset, because I work in the foundation world and we give money out to our partners, is that if you all had been considering being more flexible with the funding, so that if there's not an ability to meet benchmarks, but the organizations are actually using it for emergency needs as it relates to COVID, that we would make that adjustment accordingly, and not be so stringent about the things that we initially would be if we were in the regular world of funding. So just curious if that's the plan, or if you all have thought about that or already have done that.
So, Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, so we really, as the city, are dedicated to making sure that our community is taken care of. And part of that is making sure that our service agencies are taken care of as well. And so when COVID began, both myself and our data consultants, Aspen Solutions, really worked with the nonprofits to figure out the need not only of the community, but also of the agencies. And we were on the same level of saying, you know, we don't want to penalize you for not spending down your funding, but how do we work with you to be able to serve your community? Does that mean, you know, allowing funding for Zoom meetings? Does that mean allowing additional flexibility for how these dollars are spent? So we were really, really trying to work with agencies at the beginning of COVID, and it's going to continue as we, you know, continued through this pandemic. We want to be flexible with our agencies.
Good to know. I think that's an important piece that I don't think we do as good of a job. And there are also restrictions that are different in the public sector versus nonprofit sector. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can, as we would want to be allowed flexibility with the CARES Act funding and whatnot. I think I was just hoping that we can make sure that that's how we move forward. And I trust that you and the team, Julie and the team, will be able to make that happen. Yeah, I don't see it as like, let's hurry up and spend. I think, like you said, most of it's going to be spent down anyway fairly quickly, with the exception of some of those service providers or those organizations that used to do funding in person, not funding, programmatic work in person. And so they're having to adjust and shift. So I'm just putting that out there, and I'm assuming that that's going to take place then, flexibility and working with our partners. That's all. Thank you.
Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things on this. I had reached out to Julie and Kira over the weekend looking at this, and Kira supplied me with some information that the biannual report from the Aspen Solutions, I would ask that be shared with the entire committee. I think that without that, which was where I was having a pretty sizable stumbling with this request, because I really didn't know what I was funding other than just the numbers that were in the Excel spreadsheet. I think having background information is really helpful. The other thing is, these are 3-year contracts. Do we have a maximum number of years of award to these?
So, Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Lindell, so we do have a maximum award limit, and I believe, and Fran can correct me, I believe it's 4 years is the maximum, and the commission, well, currently felt more comfortable doing 3 years and not quite 4 years yet.
Okay, so what I'm asking is, a group that got the 3-year award, can they come back 3 years from now and be awarded again, or do we have a limitation on the number of times they can receive the award?
So, Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Lindell, we do not currently have a cap on how frequently somebody can receive an award.
I would encourage the committee to look at that so that we're able to look at different groups, and also that no one group becomes too dependent upon our award. And if they didn't receive an award, that it would completely skew their budgeting and put them underwater completely, that they're depending on that year after year after year. So that's something I would highly recommend. And I really would like to have the Aspen solution reports shared with the entire committee. I think that's really important. The next thing is kind of ties into what we talked about earlier, and that is probably talking with Byrne about this type of contract. I mean, does this type of contract appear that like Aspen Solutions, that to the IRS, that there are employees, if we're hiring them every year into perpetuity? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that it is something that in talking about it earlier tonight, I don't think we're interested in creating new positions and paying people benefits and PERA unless we know that that's the path that we want to be on. So that probably warrants some investigation. I certainly don't understand the IRS requirements well enough to say anything other than please look into that. I do not want that to become a problematic area for us. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered if Ms. Sanchez or Ms. Ochoa can send us this packet material in a PDF, as long as you're sending us the Aspen Institute thing. This chart, this Appendix A, Children and Youth Commission recommendation funding, appears up and down. And if you try to change it, you can't see it. I mean, it just keeps moving. So you have to basically be sideways to see it, which is frustrating.
The only good thing about PrimeGov is that it actually allows you to flip the screen and change the view.
Oh, really?
That's probably the only good thing about PrimeGov. Thank you.
Ah, you solved my problem. Thank you for that tip.
I just have
I did it and it works.
anything else, Councilwoman Romero Worth? I have a couple of comments or questions. One is the Children and Youth Commission, do they provide like a quarterly or biannually or annual report to the Quality of Life Committee?
So, Mr. Chair, currently, because the Quality of Life Committee was just created and the commission, this is the first time they're doing recommendations, they have not done a full report to the Quality of Life Committee, although we have given presentations about navigation, which is what the contracts are based on, and we have had Aspen Solutions also present to the Quality of Life Committee.
Okay, and then the last thing I'll add is what Councilwoman Villarreal had stated. Working with youth myself, especially during the COVID, our numbers have gone down, but our responsibility and our service that we have to provide has gone up. So it's actually, we're serving less children at the Boys and Girls Club, but it's costing us a lot more because instead of having an after school program, we're having an all day program. And so not just with the care we're having to provide, but also food. We have to feed the children breakfast, lunch, in some cases dinner. And so I think it's very important that you are flexible with the funding, especially during COVID times and how you require them to report. And then years 2 and 3, I could imagine, and hopefully the contracts are flexible enough so that if we do go back to some kind of normalcy, then their reporting or how they report goes back to pre-COVID services that they were providing. And so it's a tough challenge, but those of us that work in the nonprofit world, like Councilwoman Villarreal said, we're having to be really flexible when it comes to the way we do things. So I think as long as you keep that in mind, that'd be helpful for those entities receiving this funding. Okay, what is the pleasure of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that item is approved. Our last item is item J, which is consideration of resolution authorizing and supporting the city manager to work with public utility staff to identify and apply for federal and state funding sources for water, wastewater, and other water-related projects, including submission of an application to the Water Trust Board, among other opportunities. Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is Director McCoy available too? So I just have a quick question on the financial impact statement. which I think should be revised. On the first page, it says at the bottom, it says fiscal impact. Check here if no fiscal impact, and there is an X in the box. And it seems to me, while this does not have a fiscal impact in terms of cost, it does potentially add to our revenues and is a positive for our fiscal situation. And so I think the FIR should reflect that. And I'm just curious, Mary, if you can maybe help us understand. I mean, fiscal impacts aren't supposed to just refer costs, aren't supposed to just reflect costs, are they?
Mr. Chairman, Counselor, that is correct. They can reflect both operational expenses as well as additional revenue. I think the latter portion, the additional revenue, is really what we would like to add to the FIR to really round it out, to give all of the information. Really, what we're looking at here is the potential for growing the revenue sources for the city by being able to access additional grant revenue. So we can go ahead and add that additional piece of information on. At this point, we don't have the estimates of what that would be, but I think it is important to note, and you are absolutely correct, there is additional upside, an additional plus for passing this resolution, which would allow the city to access additional revenue, expand our revenue base.
Yeah, so I wouldn't ask for specifics as to which grants we're applying for and how much we're going to get, because we don't know any of that. This is pretty much just authorizing that we allow staff to go seek those things. So I just want to be clear, I'm not looking for specific numbers, but I think some sort of statement that we're going to grow our revenue and be better able to do the projects that we need to do. And therefore there is a fiscal impact, and it's a positive one, and that's a good thing, and we should support that. When it's time, I would move that we pass this. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Villarreal. Nope, your hand's up. So.
That was an old hand. I'm good. I had my questions answered. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else from the committee?
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes, and I'd like to co-sponsor.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that item passes, and that concludes the items that were withdrawn from the consent calendar. Item 7 is matters from staff. Ms. McCoy.
Mr. Chairman, councilors, we do have an update on the GRT reports from the month of August. We will be sending everything in writing along with the source documentation to the full council. But at this point, what staff reported from TRD today is that we are down close to 14% in GRT from August of 2019 to August of 2020.
Okay, and Ms. McCoy, do you remember where that falls as far as what we projected when we budgeted for the fiscal year?
Mr. Chair, that is a little bit under. If you recall, in the month of July, we were about a 35% decrease year over year because of the one-time payments that we had. And then in the month of August, now we're at about 14%. And so going forward in about a month, we will know for the month of September. That will round out our first quarter of GRT revenue. At that time, we are looking to provide you at the end of November, as we traditionally do, our first quarter financial update, which will really, at that point, we'll have a better understanding of where we lie after the first quarter, the full 3 months of revenue, not just with GRT, but with property taxes, lodger's tax, and so on and so forth, franchise fees, with all of our major sources of revenue for the first 3 months.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm sorry, Mary, when you say it's a little bit low, I'm not sure relative to what does that mean? Is it low compared to our projection? Is it low?
Mr. Chair, councilors, our projection was closer to 20% decrease. I can get you the exact number. We can provide that in the written update. And so this is a little bit lower than that at 14%. So percentage wise,
it's not quite as bad as we thought it was going to be.
For the first few months of the summer months, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. McCoy, any other matters from staff?
Mr. Chair, that is all at this time.
Okay, matters from the committee. Does the committee have anything? The only item I have is, well, a couple of items. First is our next meeting is November 2nd. And I would ask that the committee be available for a special finance committee meeting potentially on November 16th so that we could hear the Truth and Reconciliation Committee resolution if it's ready, because hopefully we can get that resolution to the governing body as soon as possible. But I would, so in order to do that, we may have to call a special meeting of the Finance Committee in November if Quality of Life and Public Works has seen the resolution. If it gets paused at any of those committees, then we wouldn't have a need for a special meeting. But if it goes through those two committees and finance is all that's left before it could get to the governing body, I'd like to be able to do that. So just an FYI. Okay, let's see, it is 6:06. The Dallas Cowboys and the Arizona Cardinals kick off in about 8 minutes, and Miss McCoy and I have a friendly bet. Well, not so friendly, because breakfast, right, is on the line for, okay.
Going down.
Okay, so with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
I think some of the rest of us want to get in on this.
If I would have known. Hey, Joe, what's going on with your hair there?
Have a good evening, everybody.
All right.
I have
Bye,
COVID.
everyone.
All right, good night.